April 12th, 1945. The morning Marta Keller stopped understanding her own country began with the smell of bacon. Not powdered soup, not turnip water, not the burned crust scraped from the bottom of a field kettle. Bacon. Real bacon. It curled and snapped on the griddle behind the serving counter at a prisoner of war camp in Kentucky, and 9 German women stood in line like they had walked into the wrong century. Marta was 23 years old, a former switchboard operator for a Wehrmacht signals unit. 6 weeks earlier, she had been captured outside Remagen with a torn coat, frozen feet, and a body so hungry it had stopped asking for food politely. Now she stood inside an American mess hall, holding a metal tray with both hands because her fingers were shaking too badly to trust one hand alone. In front of her, Staff Sergeant Ruth Tanaka lifted a spatula. Ruth was small, dark-haired, Japanese-American, and wearing the uniform of a country that had locked her own parents behind barbed wire in Idaho. Marta did not know that yet. All she saw was the uniform. All she expected was cruelty. Then the sergeant placed 2 eggs on Marta's tray, then 4 strips of bacon, then fried potatoes, then a biscuit split open with butter melting into it, then a spoonful of peach preserves, then coffee, then, almost casually, a wedge of orange so bright it looked painted. Marta stared at the tray until the steam touched her face. Behind her, Liesl Forster whispered in German, "Is this for officers?" No one answered. A second woman whispered, "Maybe it is Easter." Sergeant Tanaka looked from face to face. "It's Thursday," she said carefully. "Just breakfast." Just breakfast. Those 2 words did more damage to Marta's certainty than any interrogation had done. Because in Germany, by the spring of 1945, a breakfast like that belonged to memory, or a wedding, or a lie. And here, in the country she'd been trained to hate, it was Thursday. Marta had not always been the kind of person who trembled in front of eggs. In 1942, when she entered signals training in Augsburg, she still had round cheeks, a good wool skirt, and a father who believed the Reich could not lose because newspapers said so in heavy black letters. Her job had seemed ordinary at first. She connected field calls. She copied coded traffic. She listened to men with clipped voices request fuel, spare parts, casualty reports, replacement wire. She was not a soldier with a rifle. She told herself that mattered. For nearly a year, the war remained something that happened through headphones. Then the bread changed. First, the loaves grew darker, then heavier, then strange with fillers that scratched the throat. Chestnut meal, ground roots, anything that could pretend to be flour. By late 1944, Marta had learned the shape of hunger the way other girls learned songs. There was the morning hunger, sharp and angry, the afternoon hunger, dull and stupid, and the night hunger, the one that made a person dream about chewing. Her unit moved west as the front collapsed. Each transfer brought less food and more speeches. The officers stopped saying victory. They said duty. They said sacrifice. They said history would remember. Marta noticed that even the officers' belts needed new holes. In February, near the Rhine, her signals truck was abandoned in a ditch after an artillery strike cut the road ahead. The men fled first. The women followed as long as their legs obeyed. Marta made it as far as a frozen orchard. When American infantry found her, she was sitting against an apple tree, holding a radio headset with no wire attached. She raised both hands, not because she was brave, because she was too tired to lift them twice. The transport west took days, then weeks. A guarded train. A ship that smelled of salt, fuel, and vomit. A processing center. Questions. Delousing powder. Medical inspection. More questions. Marta answered what she knew, which was very little, and what she did not know, which was almost everything that mattered. When she reached the Kentucky camp, she weighed 91 pounds. The army doctor wrote the number on a chart, circled it, and told Captain Eleanor Price that the women were not merely thin, they were starving. Captain Price commanded the small female compound on the edge of the camp. She had expected enemy prisoners. She had not expected bones in gray cloth. 9 women climbed from the transport truck that first afternoon. Their uniforms no longer fit. Their boots did not match. 2 had gums so swollen the doctor suspected early scurvy. 1 had fainted during processing and apologized before she hit the floor. Corporal Rosa Delgado, who had grown up poor in El Paso and thought she understood hunger, watched them cross the yard and muttered, "Holy Mother, they look like ghosts that learned to salute." Captain Price did not answer. She was busy noticing the same thing. The women moved like people trained to survive by making no trouble, no demands, no eye contact for too long, no questions that might sound like complaints. Barracks 14 had been converted quickly for female prisoners. Fresh sheets, iron bunks, a stove that worked, a washroom with hot water for 2 hours every evening. To Marta, it seemed impossible that any prison would contain soap that smelled faintly of lavender. That first night, Ruth Tanaka carried in beef stew with carrots, onions, and potatoes. She warned them to eat slowly. They did not. Liesel vomited after the first bowl and cried while Ruth rubbed her back and told her, not unkindly, that an empty stomach could be frightened by kindness, too. The next morning brought oatmeal with brown sugar. The morning after that, pancakes, then eggs, then ham, then potatoes with onions, then coffee so real Marta kept smelling it before every sip, as if it might vanish if she trusted it too quickly. At first the women suspected a trick. Greta Vollmer, who had been a clerk in a supply depot, said the Americans were fattening them before interrogation. Annie Weber thought the food was staged. "Perhaps they want us to write home," she whispered, "so our families will believe the enemy is merciful." But the interrogations were plain. Captain Price asked for names, units, duties, dates, and what they knew about communications routes. When Marta said she had connected calls but rarely knew their content, the captain made a note and moved on. No threats, no lamps aimed at her face, no fists, no snarling men asking where the secret maps were hidden. Once, Captain Price offered Marta a cigarette. Marta declined because she had never smoked. The captain smiled and said, "Good. One less American habit to learn." That was the first time Marta realized the woman across the table was not trying to scare her. She was trying to measure the size of the lie Marta had been living inside. By the second week, the food had become the camp's most dangerous argument. Not because there was too little, because there was too much. The prisoners saw American guards complain. They complained about powdered eggs when the eggs were real enough to turn yellow in a pan. They complained about coffee. They complained about Spam. They complained about too many beans, too much gravy, biscuits again, peaches again, pie again. The complaints made the German women furious at first, then sick, then quiet, because nobody staged boredom. If the Americans were performing abundance, they would have performed gratitude with it. Instead, they scraped leftovers into bins. They traded desserts. They left half cups of coffee cooling on windowsills. They lived inside plenty so casually that they could afford to dislike it. On the 9th morning, Clara Rice pointed at the serving line and asked Staff Sergeant Tanaka in careful English, "This is special food for prisoners?" Ruth shook her head. "Same ration as the WAC detachment. Same as the guards when the kitchen has enough." The word enough struck Marta harder than Ruth intended. Enough. In Germany, enough had become a political word, a family word, a fantasy word. Here it sounded like inventory. Ruth noticed the women looking through the mess hall window at the soldiers' line outside. "You can watch," she said. "Nobody is hiding it." So Marta watched. A private in wrinkled fatigues took eggs, potatoes, bacon, coffee, and a biscuit. He yawned. He did not stare. He did not cross himself. He did not whisper a prayer over the butter. He simply ate. And when he finished only half the biscuit, he tossed the rest away. That was the moment Marta understood the war differently. Not politically, not yet morally, materially. Germany had demanded belief from starving people. America could afford doubt after breakfast. The realization was humiliating. It was also impossible to unknow. Ruth Tanaka understood humiliation better than Marta guessed. Before the war, Ruth had lived in Hood River, Oregon, where her father leased 10 acres of orchard land and her mother made rice balls for school lunches Ruth was embarrassed to open in front of white children. Ruth said the pledge every morning. She read adventure books. She wanted to become a teacher. Then Pearl Harbor turned her face into evidence. In 1942, her family sold furniture for almost nothing, packed what they could carry, and boarded a train with shades pulled down. They spent 2 years at Minidoka. Dust in the barracks, coal smoke in winter, guard towers at the edge of the camp. Her youngest brother asked once why American soldiers needed rifles if they were all Americans. No one in the family knew how to answer without breaking something inside him. Ruth joined the Women's Army Corps after her release. When people asked why she would wear the uniform of a government that had caged her family, she gave the simplest answer. "Because I'm not letting them decide what country I belong to." The real answer was harder. She wanted America to be better than what had happened to her family. And some days she thought the only way to force a country toward decency was to behave as if it could still learn. That was why she cooked carefully for the German women. Not tenderly, not foolishly, carefully. She knew they had served a monstrous government. She also knew hunger made all ideology look smaller. On Marta's 16th day in the camp, she stayed behind after breakfast with her empty tray. Ruth was wiping the counter. Marta stood there so long that Ruth finally looked up. "You need something?" Marta searched for English. "Why do you give us good food?" Ruth looked at the tray. "Because it's my job." "No," Marta shook her head. "Not job. Why no anger?" Ruth stopped wiping. For a moment the mess hall noise filled the space between them. Then she said, "Anger doesn't cook eggs." Marta did not understand. Ruth tried again. "You're hungry. I have a kitchen. That part is simple." "But we are enemy." "Yes. Germany and Japan." "I know who Germany fought beside." Marta lowered her eyes. "You should hate us." Ruth gave a small, tired smile. "My government put my parents in a camp because their parents were born in Japan. Should I hate every American who eats in this room?" Marta had no answer. Ruth folded the cloth in her hands. "Hate is heavy. I carry enough." That sentence followed Marta back to Barracks 14. It stayed with her through kitchen duty, through English lessons, through the evenings when the women tried to describe America to one another and failed. They had been taught that Americans were crude, greedy, without culture, without discipline. A nation of salesmen and gangsters who bombed churches because old stones meant nothing to them. And yet, the Americans running the camp kept ledgers, boiled instruments, inspected bedding, followed schedules, argued about regulations, and fed prisoners with the same system that fed themselves. It was not sentimental kindness. That might have been easier to dismiss. It was administrative mercy. Stamped forms, medical charts, ration crates, clean blankets, a ladle moving from pot to bowl with the same measure every time. By the third week, Marta had gained 7 pounds. Liesel stopped waking with leg cramps. Annie's gums stopped bleeding. Greta volunteered in the kitchen and learned how to bake biscuits from a farm girl from Tennessee who had never met a German before and kept asking if all German houses had tile roofs. The ordinary became unbearable, because once the women could think past hunger, memory came back. So did questions. Who had lied to them? What else had been hidden? What had they agreed not to see? The answer arrived in newspapers. On April 18th, Corporal Delgado entered Barracks 14 with a stack of American papers pressed flat against her chest. She did not joke that morning. Captain Price followed behind her. The captain's face had the stiff, formal expression of someone carrying bad news and knowing it was not enough. "I need you to see these," she said. The women gathered around the table. The first paper showed a photograph from a camp the British had liberated. Bodies, not soldiers, not battle dead. Bodies in heaps. Bodies with striped cloth hanging from limbs that barely looked human. Living prisoners staring into the camera with eyes too large for their faces. Marta read the caption slowly. Bergen-Belsen. Typhus. Starvation. Thousands dead. More dying. Greta grabbed the edge of the table. Clara said, "No." Then again, "No." Liesel began to cry before she understood she was crying. Annie pushed the paper away, then pulled it back, as if refusing to look had become its own accusation. Captain Price did not soften the blow. "There are more reports," she said. "Dachau, Buchenwald, others. The photographs are real." Clara shook her head. "Allied lies." Her voice wanted to be angry. It came out small. Marta kept staring at one image. A man on a wooden bunk, mouth open, eyes alive, body already almost gone. She had complained of hunger. She had thought she knew starvation. But the body in the photograph had not been neglected by war. It had been designed by policy. That distinction opened a pit under everything. The women spent the next days reading whatever papers the guards allowed them to have. They translated articles for one another with dictionaries. They argued. They denied. They remembered. A Jewish neighbor in Dusseldorf who disappeared in 1941. A teacher who stopped coming to school. A shop window broken and never repaired. A cousin who said one should not ask where the trains went. Everyone had a story like that. Small, excusable at the time. An absence explained by the nearest official lie. Now each memory returned with teeth. That night, Marta wrote her first unsent letter. "Dear Mama, I do not know whether you are alive. I do not know if our street still exists. But today I saw what Germany made while telling us we were hungry for greatness." She stopped there because her hand would not move. Later she added, "The Americans feed us eggs. Our country fed other people to death. I cannot fit both truths into the same head." For 3 mornings after the photographs, Marta could barely eat. The tray that had once looked miraculous now seemed like an accusation. Eggs, bacon, butter, coffee, all of it placed before a woman who had served the machine that starved others on purpose. Ruth found her sitting alone after breakfast, food untouched. "You have to eat," Ruth said. Marta looked up. "I do not deserve it." Ruth sat across from her. "That feeling won't bring anyone back." Marta's eyes filled. "What should I do with it?" Ruth was silent long enough for the kitchen noise to rise around them. Then she said, "Make it useful." Marta almost laughed because the sentence was so American, practical even in grief. What does useful mean? It means you tell the truth when lying would be easier. It means you don't pretend not knowing is the same as innocence. It means when someone hungry stands in front of you and you have food, you feed them. Marta looked at the orange wedge on her tray. Ruth continued, softer. "When we were in Minidoka, I heard what Japanese soldiers had done in China. I was ashamed of things I did not do. Then I had to decide whether shame would make me smaller or more careful." Marta whispered, "And did it?" "Both," Ruth said. "At first." The women in Barracks 14 changed after that. Not all at once, not cleanly. Shame does not produce wisdom just because it arrives. Sometimes it produces silence, sometimes anger, sometimes a desperate attempt to prove one has been innocent enough. Captain Price watched the women move through these stages and recorded none of it in official reports. The reports said their health improved, their discipline remained satisfactory, their work assignments were completed, their English lessons were progressing. The reports did not say that Liesel had stopped sleeping, or that Greta confessed to the others that she had once repeated a joke about Jews because laughing had felt safer than objecting, or that Marta spent an hour every evening trying to remember each coded call she had connected, and whether any of them had helped move men, weapons, prisoners, or orders towards something unforgivable. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. Across the American camp, bells rang. Men shouted. Someone found a trumpet. Someone else found whiskey that had not been listed on any quartermaster form. Captain Price told the German women they were not required to remain inside the barracks. No one would force them to celebrate. No one would punish them for staying away. Most stayed. Liesel sat on her bunk with a blanket around her shoulders and said, "My country is dead." Greta answered, "No, the country we imagined is dead. The other one was alive the whole time." That was cruel. It was also true enough that no one corrected her. Marta walked outside near dusk. From across the compound came the sound of American soldiers singing badly. A young guard saw her standing by the fence and raised his paper cup. "To better Germans," he called. He meant it kindly. Marta wished you'd insulted her instead. Kindness left her no simple place to stand. After surrender, the question became what would happen to them. Repatriation lists were posted. Transport plans changed twice in 1 week because occupied Germany was chaos. Food shortages, destroyed rail lines, cities without roofs, families missing under rubble. Refugees moving in every direction with carts, bundles, children, and no certainty. Captain Price met with the 9 women in the barracks common room. "You will be returned through processing centers in Europe," she said. "The schedule is not final, but it will happen." For a moment nobody spoke. Home had become a word with no walls around it. Marta had not heard from her mother since 1943. Liesel's family had lived near Dresden. Clara's older brother had been SS, a fact she had admitted only after the camp photographs made silence impossible. Annie's husband had died outside Minsk. Greta had no one left except an aunt who might or might not still live in Munich. Return meant language. Return meant ruins. Return meant neighbors who might insist they had known nothing. Return meant neighbors who had known too much. Return meant becoming German again before they knew what that could mean without lies. The request began as a whisper between bunks, then a question over laundry, then an argument behind the kitchen, then a decision none of them said aloud until Marta said it to Ruth. "What if a person cannot go back?" Ruth was cutting bread. She did not look up. "Most people can go back. They just don't go back as the same person." "No," Marta swallowed. "I mean, what if we ask to stay?" The knife stopped. Ruth looked at her then. "Stay in America?" Marta nodded. "As prisoners? As anything?" Ruth set the bread knife down very carefully. "You understand what Americans will call you?" "Yes." "You understand some will never care what you did or didn't do. German will be enough." "Yes." "You understand this country is not clean just because it fed you." Marta thought of Minidoka. "Yes." "Then why?" Marta looked through the kitchen window at the yard where a row of sheets moved in the wind. "Because here, the lie broke." 2 days later, Marta stood in Major Warren Hale's office with 4 other women behind her. Not 9. 4 had chosen repatriation. 1 had received word that her mother was alive near Cologne. Another could not bear the thought of remaining in the country that had bombed her city. Clara said she needed to find out what her brother had done and whether any name could survive it. By the time the request reached command, 5 women remained. Marta Keller, Liesel Forster, Greta Vollmer, Annie Weber, and a quiet seamstress named Sabina Ott, who had spoken little since the day she arrived but had been the first to say, "I am more afraid of the old lies than of strangers." Major Hale listened without interrupting. Captain Price stood beside the desk, expression unreadable. Marta spoke for the group. "Sir, we understand we are prisoners. We understand the war is over. We understand that we are supposed to return to Germany." Her English shook, but did not fail. "We ask whether there is any legal way to remain in the United States, not as honored guests, not as people who forget what we served, as displaced persons, as workers, as women who wish to build lives where truth has already found us." Major Hale leaned back. "You are asking not to go home?" Liesel stepped forward. "Home is not gone only because of bombs, sir." The room went still. Major Hale rubbed one hand over his jaw. "There is no simple regulation for this." Greta gave a sad little laugh. "There is no simple country for us either." The request went to Washington. While it traveled through desks, signatures, objections, and cautious language, the 5 women waited. Waiting had become the main skill of prisoners. But this waiting felt different. It had a future in it. Not an easy one, just a possible one. The answer came back with conditions. They could not simply remain as former POWs. They could be reclassified temporarily while church-backed resettlement, security review, health clearance, and employment guarantees were arranged. They would need sworn statements about wartime service. They would need guarantors. They would need to prove they had not belonged to the Nazi Party or participated in crimes. They would need to accept that permission to stay was not forgiveness. It was only permission to begin proving something with the rest of their lives. Local churches argued about them. Some people said Americans had no business feeding Germans when American mothers had sons buried in Europe. Some said mercy was not the same as approval. Some said if the women were ashamed, Germany was exactly where they belonged. At a Lutheran church in town, Reverend Samuel Baird stood before his congregation and said, "We fed them when they were enemies. If we stop helping the moment they ask to become accountable people, then what exactly did our kindness mean?" That sentence did not convince everyone. It convinced enough. Ruth's family in Oregon agreed to guarantor Marta. They had returned from internment to an orchard that was half ruined and a house with broken windows. They knew what it meant to be judged by blood. Captain Price's widowed sister in Cleveland agreed to guarantor Liesel. A bakery owner in Louisville took Greta and Sabine as paid apprentices. Annie went to a Catholic hospital laundry in St. Louis, where the nuns believed a woman who had seen too much of war might understand wounded men better than most. In July, the 5 women left the camp not as prisoners, and not exactly as free citizens, but as people standing in the thin legal doorway between punishment and possibility. Marta's last morning in the mess hall was a Thursday. Ruth served her eggs, bacon, potatoes, a biscuit, coffee, and an orange wedge. Neither woman mentioned the first tray. They did not need to. Marta tried to thank her. The words failed in both languages. So Ruth handed her a paper bag with 3 biscuits inside. "For the train," she said. Marta held the bag like a document. Then Ruth added, "Do not make America into another myth. It will disappoint you if you need it to be pure." Marta nodded. "What should I make it?" Ruth smiled faintly. "A place where you keep choosing better when nobody is making you." 26 years later, in a kitchen outside Portland, Marta Keller Tanaka cracked eggs into a bowl while her teenage daughter complained that breakfast was boring. The girl wanted cereal. Her younger brother wanted toast without butter because butter felt too heavy. Marta turned away so they would not see her smile. Children born inside enough had the sacred right to be unimpressed by it. On the wall near the stove hung a framed photograph. 5 women in plain dresses, standing beside a train platform in July 1945. Behind them, Staff Sergeant Ruth Tanaka looked directly at the camera, one hand raised against the sun. Marta had married Ruth's cousin David in 1949. Liesel became a school teacher and taught German literature with the camps included, not hidden at the end. Greta and Sabina opened a bakery whose first sign read simply, "Bread is ready." Annie became a nurse's aide in a veterans hospital and spent 30 years changing bandages for men who had once worn the uniform of her enemy. Every April, the 5 women wrote to one another. Not sentimental letters, truthful ones. They wrote about children, taxes, bad knees, and the weather. They also wrote the names they had remembered. The missing neighbors, the vanished teacher, the cousin who had warned them not to ask questions. They wrote because forgetting was how the first lie had survived. Marta's daughter once asked why her mother kept orange wedges on the plate even when nobody ate them. Marta almost gave the easy answer. Vitamin C, habit, color. Instead, she sat down. She told the story. Not all of it. Not yet. Enough for a child to understand that a tray can be a weapon if it proves a lie. She told her about a Thursday morning in Kentucky. About 2 eggs, bacon, butter, coffee. An orange wedge bright enough to make starving women doubt every speech they had ever heard. Her daughter listened, then looked at the breakfast table as if seeing it for the first time. "Was that when you became American?" she asked. Marta thought for a long moment. Outside, rain tapped the kitchen window. Inside, the eggs cooled. "No," she said finally. "That was when I stopped being certain." And that, she had learned, was the first honest country she ever lived in. Not Germany, not America. The country after certainty. It had no flag, only work, only memory, only the duty to feed the hungry without pretending that feeding them erased what happened. Marta lifted the orange wedge from her plate and set it on her daughter's. The girl did not understand the ceremony, not fully, but she ate it, and Marta watched the bright fruit disappear, one ordinary bite at a time. The breakfast had not forgiven her. It had done something harder. It had made forgiveness impossible to fake. And it had shown her where truth sometimes begins. Not in speeches, not in flags, not in the loud promises nations make about themselves. Sometimes truth begins on a metal tray, in the hands of an enemy, on an ordinary Thursday morning.